This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Brian Hirt from CueCode, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Excited to be here.
Super cool to have you along for the ride with me today. You are based in the great state of Wisconsin, yeah?
Indeed, yes. Thank you for recognizing that.
You said you were having some really, stretch of really nice weather right now. I guess it's it's a tail end of summer here, but you'll have I don't know, if you're lucky, you might have another month of summer left, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, summer Wisconsin's the place to be. So.
I love it. Well, listen, before we get into CueCode and what you guys do and what you're building over at CueCode, why don't you tell me how you came to be in this B2B world, B2B commerce broadly, B2B sales world? How did you get here?
Yeah, great question. So I started my career in distribution. As I was sort of getting out of school and looking for work, I got hired at a wire and cable distributor. So we served a lot of like OEMs and sub-assemblers, and didn't know much about it. I actually started as like an inventory planner. So I got sort of, on the ground experience, what it's like bringing inventory and have salespeople telling you, oh yeah, they're definitely going to buy this and all that good stuff. And ended up in a marketing role. And, we had about 75 sales reps. So it was about a $250 million company. So, think of it as a medium-sized distributor. And, I love the experience. I spent 5 years there. Really got to know, the sales team. I sort of sat literally between sort of purchasing and sales in this, where my cubicle was. I had, a chance to visit all our branches around the world and talk with the sales reps there. And I feel like I got a good appreciation, really loved sort of the experience of distribution, sort of, what their, what that business model looks like, what it looks like to grow with customers. I spent a lot of time in our data. I had sort of a marketing analyst type role for a while, and then, ultimately ended up leading the, the marketing group there for a time. And then, eventually made my way into the software world. But I was still basically serving, B2B companies, so manufacturers and distributors, and sort of got to know, especially distributors in a lot of different industries, and got to sort of understand their problems and some of the ways that the software is able to address those.
I love that. And when you started to decide what you were going to build, you clearly wanted to build something for the industry. It sounds like this was very much a scratching the itch kind of scenario, meaning that, hey, I've seen behind the curtain. I've seen the inner workings of how distributors work. I've seen how, sure, we have CRM systems, right? And oftentimes we'll use CRM systems from kind of quote to cash, right? Or lead to cash, right? Yep. And managing that process. But most CRM systems, they are not also sales systems, right? They are not designed. They are designed to track a process. They are not designed to enhance that process with intelligence of any kind. That's not what they're designed to do. They're designed to be a system of record, and that's kind of it, right? And so sometimes with digital commerce, we can get, especially with advanced B2B focused commerce systems, we can get, as part of the quoting process, we can get product recommendations, we can get personalization, we have personalized pricing, we have, when we have restricted catalogs that are per customer, et cetera. We can configure all that in commerce systems, particularly e-commerce systems. And in some respects, we can configure some of that in our punch out systems, in our EDI systems. From a sales perspective, we can do that. But there isn't really, apart from what it looks like you guys do on the surface, and in all transparency, we've never worked on a project together, so I've never sort of seen the inner workings of your platform. But it sounds like what you guys have set out to build is almost like a digital sales strategist in the sales rep's pocket. Right? It's how can we take all of the known and unknown things about our customers? How can we then turn that into intelligent sales strategies that are designed down to either an account level or even a buyer level within those accounts, taking in all the data from all the sources we have available within our business and everything that we know about that customer's behavior and all the interactions they have with us as a supplier. So Is that kind of where the thinking was at when you thought, hey, this is what I want to build?
Yeah, I think so. I want to come back to it, address those points about sort of, how it works within like the data we use and sort of what are the applications. But I'll start with sort of how I decided this is what I want to build. So I keep coming back to like three very specific experiences I had working in distribution. It's very much like I'm sort of scratching the itch, sort of building the thing I wish I had 15 years ago, right? And it's like we would, like any distributor, we had a bunch of data. We had a lot of customers, a lot of products, a lot of customers buying the same products over and over again, right? And we said, well, we need to reduce customer churn, right? We know we have this data. Like, wouldn't it be great if a sales rep knew when a customer stopped buying something, right? And so, given the technology at the time, I sort of went off and built like a BI report, right? I built the poor man's, Excel BI is how I think of it. And it was great. It was novel, right? We had charts. I had detail you could drill down to and filter to. And what was going on with every account. These would get emailed out to the team every month. But, people say, oh, this is nice. These are colorful charts. I haven't seen things like this before. But ultimately is telling people what happened, last month, right? Usually it took me about a week to get it all done and get it out the door, right? So you're looking at delayed information and you're looking at all this detailed information, right? There were nuggets to be found, but you had to find them, right? You had to go drill into the report, filter, look at every account, look at every trend, figure out what's going on. So when I look back at that, like that was not, we just needed something that told the sales rep, said, hey, this account stopped buying this. Like, they should have bought it this week and they didn't, right? And so now's a good time to reach out to them. So that was the thing we wanted, but we didn't even know how to articulate that at the time. It was just sort of like, well, let's build a report and hope people look at it, right? And I think most of us have been through the experience to know that, well, most people don't look at the report. I also think about we would bring in suppliers we're trying to partner with. So, distributors it's a partnership between suppliers and customers, right? And you're sort of the middleman, the sales in the middle. And we'd bring in these new vendors. So we sold a lot of wire and cable products you can imagine a wire harness. Some of the audience probably knows, what that looks like, right? You've got like cable and tubing and connectors and cable ties and all this.
Pigtails and everything.
Yeah, you got it all, right? We were really good at selling the wire. So a lot of that. We knew our customers also needed cable ties and, tape and tubing and connectors and glands and all the things that go with it,
but everything, boxes, termination boxes.
Right? Yeah, we knew they needed those things, but they weren't buying very much of it from us, and so we knew there was opportunity. We'd bring people in. Yeah, I remember bringing in a supplier who made watertight cord grips, right? And it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a great thing for the market. We'd bring them in. We'd buy everyone Panera. Right, all the sales reps would come in, finish their sandwich, and they would go back and keep taking orders. And we would put out these, we'd create these like flyers basically internally and say, hey, here's the new watertight cord grip. We really want you guys to go sell this. And we brought in a stocking package, right? We brought in 500 units of this and that. And then we just cross our fingers and hope we'd sell it, right? We had no, if I put myself in the shoes of a sales rep, right, I want to walk away from that meeting with like 5 accounts I can call who I know are good candidates to use that product. But we didn't give them that guidance, right? We gave them lunch and a printout, right? Sort of hope
and you expected them to figure it out, right? Because they're supposed to be the experts in their field.
Exactly, right. And my experience with that was over the years we tried that, we were really not very successful in moving the needle on those initiatives, right? Like in the years I was there, we went from selling a minuscule amount of these things to selling 2 times a minuscule amount, of these things, right? It wasn't very an effective strategy. So I think about, as you have strategies as a business, which every distributor I talk to has these goals or initiatives, whatever you think of them, how do you break it down to specific guidance for the team around what I need to do next, right? What are the steps I can take to accomplish that goal as a company? And it's got to be bite-sized, right? I need to know, call this customer about this product, good chance they could use it, right? The last thing I think about is the spreadsheet I would get from finance. So I was the marketing guy. Finance would say, hey, we've got 372, SKUs that are sitting on the shelf that we haven't sold in 18 months, which is our, that's the red line we draw to say we need to scrap this inventory. And Brian, can you help us go sell it? Because now if we can sell it for, there's copper in it, so you have scrap value. But, if we could sell this for anything, even at cost, it'd still be a big, financial win for the company. So we'd take that spreadsheet and I would even do a little analysis and be like, well, these are the customers who bought these things in the past, right? And then I had this big spreadsheet with all the data, and you just need to filter down to your name as a sales rep. And I'd blast it out to 75 sales reps and say, hey guys, please, please, please help us sell this inventory, right? So not only do I have no idea whether or not we were successful in selling it, right? We had no sort of tracking around that. That's sort of, I don't know, foregone conclusion, but I'm pretty sure that email was easily deleted, right? They had very little incentive to act on it. It was an unfamiliar, it was whatever spreadsheet format I dreamed up, that month about how to use this information. And so even if I had specific guidance, it has to be delivered in a way that people can easily understand and consume it, ideally in their existing workflow.
Operationalize it. Really, like what we're talking about, how can we operationalize this? Because if we can't operationalize it, we can't scale it. That's the key.
Exactly, right? So it'd be this one-off thing that would happen every quarter, right? And it was not operationalized. So we scrapped a lot of inventory that I'm sure we could have sold, right? Sort of, those are some of the conclusions I come back to. So when I think about CueCode, I think about two things. So one is guiding the sales rep on the next best action they can use to grow sales. And so this could come absent of a strategy. You could just say, hey, we see in the data, this is the buying frequency for this product for this customer. So when they deviate from that frequency, here's a good opportunity. Or we can see in your data, a lot of customers are buying the wire and they're not buying the connectors. So we see the wire they're buying. Therefore, these are some of the connectors that we think are likely to go with this product, things like that. So, that's to me table stakes, right? You sort of have that sort of intelligent recommendation. But the other thing I'm trying to do is to allow teams to overlay their strategy, right? So when I'm bringing in a new supplier for the watertight cord grips or whatever the product is you're selling, translate that into, well, what are the specific actions they can take? And so we know, hey, this is the gap. They're not buying any cord grips, right? We know that they could be based on the other products they're buying. This is the customer to go talk to about, right? So instead of sort of giving a broadcast, right, we'd put it on the website, right? Come buy watertight cord grips from us. Well, that doesn't apply to everybody, right? That only applies to a handful of people. And so you want to have very targeted, personalized messaging to those accounts is how I think about it. So it's both sort of using the data that's in existing, really it's the ERP data, Jason. It's like, the stuff that every distributor has because they're using it to process orders. That alone, I find, is enough to provide great, intelligence to the team, but then, give you the opportunity to overlay, hey, these are the things we want to do. These are the areas we want to focus on growing. And so you can get very tailored at sort of how those recommendations go out. The other thing I want to mention too, because I know you have a big focus on sort of the e-com side. So I think about, everything we've sort of alluded to, you think of a sales rep acting on it, right? You've got, here's recommendations to this customer. How can a sales rep reach out to them? Well, increasingly, right, more and more business is going to the e-commerce channels. A lot of times it's not as fast as people would sometimes think, but depending on the business line, it's a growing portion, right? So I think about how can you continue to have a personalized selling experience in that B2B environment, right? So if someone goes from ordering from a sales rep with 20 years experience to now only buying online, you're losing something there, right? The sales rep is able to, even if they didn't have guidance, they've got the experience to be able to proactively sell that customer and sort of build that relationship. And so if you move them to a digital channel where their interactions become less frequent, how can you continue to sell them proactively, right? How can you, I think about that carousel, every e-commerce site has, right? You log in or whatever, and it's like, oh, these are the popular items. I don't have a login to a lot of the distributors, to know exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure that depending on who logs in, a lot of people see the same thing, right? If you're promoting the watertight cord grip, everybody sees here's the new watertight cord grip, right? Whether or not that's applicable to what you're doing or not. And so I see a lot of real, to me, that's like valuable real estate that is begging for a more personalized experience for the customer as they log in. So I think of it as, CueCode is providing, guidance, or I'm calling it cues for any customer interaction, right? So whether they're picking up the phone and they're calling your inside sales rep could be say, hey, these are a couple things we need to talk to this account about because they're not buying this category. They're due to reorder this. They committed. I quoted them this thing 2 weeks ago and they never bought it, right? If they're logging into your e-commerce site, you can absolutely be sort of very specifically targeting them with products that not just like, I think of abandoned cart and, also bought, fries with that sort of, options as like, a lot of e-commerce platforms do that. And I think that's good, but ultimately I think it's much more powerful if you can be proactively suggesting products and categories that they're buying from your competition, right? Just they have to be based on the other things they're already buying from you. So I see that as a big untapped opportunity, whether it's, sales guidance, inside, outside sales, or just sort of a digital interaction, if you will.
Yeah, and I think what's special about your technology is the fact that this is designed around the actual workflows and the actual purchasing process that happens in B2B, whilst also respecting things like their price list, their entitlements, all the things that have to be overlaid over any type of a sales experience. It takes all that into account because it has access to all the data from the ERP. And so the difference, I think of what you're building as kind of like personalization, but specifically for B2B experiences.
Yes.
So basically what you have built there is, so whether it's reordering, whether it's cross sells, upsells, contractual variances, whether it's quotation follow-up, whatever it might be, most of what you have built, like product recommendations, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
This, almost all of it, not all of it, because we don't typically have quotes in retail, but apart from that, what you have built, this already has existed for a long time in retail
Yeah.
e-commerce and in
Yeah.
retail sales. But the way that it has typically worked in the retail world is wisdom of the crowd, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, cool. Customer A buys this top with this pants or with this accessory or with this
Yeah.
belt or
Right.
whatever it might be.
Right.
And so therefore we know, based on the experience of tens of thousands of interactions with the website, not just who's bought what with what, but okay, they go from this category page to this PDP to this joining PDP. They add these items to the cart. They purchase these items. They add these items to the product comparison list. They basically, this is what they put into the search bar. They take all of these interaction points, they track them, and then they say,
Yep.
okay, based on the wisdom of what the crowd is doing, this is logical to recommend this shirt with this pair of shoes, right? So,
Yep.
and that's great in retail because
Yes.
wisdom of the crowd makes sense. Because if I'm taking the wisdom of the crowd from somebody in Wisconsin, right, and I'm localizing that and I'm saying, hey, somebody from Wisconsin with a Wisconsin IP address, if we can personalize down to that level, then obviously the weather in Wisconsin likely on any given day is going to be very different to what it is in LA. And that's as far as the personalization kind of needs to go in terms of combining wisdom of the crowd with maybe some geolocation, and everybody in the world or in our market gets to access the same catalog. They get charged the same price
Yeah.
for the same SKU. So there's not a lot of additional complexity that needs to be added to that level of personalization to do the targeting. In B2B, it's a totally different scenario, right? So
Yes.
we have buyers within accounts. So we have that tier. We've got the accounts themselves, and so we want to look holistically at what the entire account is buying from us, regardless of which buyers in the account are actually doing the buying on behalf of the account. Then we
Mm-hmm.
have being able to understand what types of items actually naturally work together. Pump,
Mm-hmm.
valve, pump, piping, right? Like there's some natural cross sells that happen in specific verticals and categories of products in B2B, but we also have to respect pricing, and we have to respect entitlements, and we have to respect purchase history of that individual account, right? And
Yes.
so and also we have to understand what their budget is. We have to understand, what the status of their credit account is. There's so many more things that we have to understand to do that one-to-one level of personalization. And generic wisdom of the crowd personalization does not work in B2B because
Agreed.
you just can't, it just doesn't work because there's so many more restrictions and kind of guardrails that have to be in place in the B2B world to create truly personalized experiences, not only for the customer, but for the rep that services them. And so
Mm-hmm.
this, I think, is what I love about what you're doing here is that because you came from the B2B world, you understood these nuances. And instead of building something that was kind of a carbon copy of what retailers do in terms of personalization, you built something very tailored for the B2B world.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I like to think about so not everyone's like a wire and cable expert or a pipe and valve expert, but we're all food experts, right? So I think about, so I've worked with some food distributors. Imagine, a customer buys tomato, right? Well, you could just sort of look at the global sort of, oh, what goes with that, right? You come up with different answers, but ultimately, if that's an Italian restaurant, they might need noodles, right? The
Yeah.
pasta to go with that, right? If that's a Mexican restaurant, the next thing they need are avocados or tortillas, right? So
Or
the
lettuce
fact,
or whatever.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So the fact that they bought tomatoes does not tell you exactly what the next item is. And so the way I've approached the challenge at CueCode is not to say this item goes with that item, because that's a very different answer depending on who it is, but to look at the account holistically and say, well, these are the categories they buy, and there's a clustering algorithm, right, that is able to do that. And it will sort of magically cluster together all the Mexican restaurants because they tend to buy the same mix of product categories in similar proportions. So we know then, hey, this is basically a Mexican restaurant and they're not buying any tortillas, right? But we can see they're buying the avocados and the tomatoes and the lettuce and the cheese to go with it. And so we can see clearly what the gap is and suggest what items need to go with that, same as we would look at an Italian restaurant and see what gaps exist there. But that happens sort of naturally just based on without you even having to classify it as, this is the restaurant type, because everyone has a classification too, and you can we can use that, but I find in most cases you don't even have to. You can just see what they buy, and it will sort of classify them just based on their own behavior, and you can figure out what the next move is from there, specifically just based on what the gaps look like.
And I think it also helps to surface, and this is the other thing about personalization in the retail world, it also surfaces gaps in catalog, right? So in other words, okay, cool. Now, normally I would like to sell, if I sell pumps and I'm a distributor, then I would maybe normally sell valves, right? But if I've got a gap
Mm-hmm.
in valves, right, then that's going to become pretty damn obvious if like 90% of the people that buy pumps from us are not buying any valves from us. Either we don't carry valves at all, or we're not carrying
Yes, right.
valves that are appropriate for them. And
Yeah,
and
or they're
so
not
it's
priced properly, et cetera. Yeah. Yeah.
so this helps to highlight gaps in catalog breadth, depth, pricing, availability. Maybe it's we
Yep.
carry it, but we don't have it in stock, so they're going somewhere else to buy it. So it surfaces problematic issues around everything to do with catalog at the same time. And I think that's
Yep.
from an NPD development, from a new sourcing perspective, pipeline perspective, like it helps more than just suggesting the right sale to the right customer.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed. I was going to mention the other thing that that I'm focused on doing with CueCode that I think is a bit different is that I'm trying, my goal is to not introduce another tool to the team, right? Or even to the, I mean, obviously it becomes part of the tech stack, but not basically use what you have, right? So whether it's the e-commerce portal, whether it's some CRM you have that, like you mentioned at the start, doesn't come with this sort of stuff, whether it's simply your order entry tool, provide the guidance in that context so that the sales reps, if it's a sales rep using, order entry, they get guidance. As soon as they type in the customer they're selling to, you can show additional recommendations. If it's on e-commerce, they're logging in, you know who they are, you can show the additional cues there. I even have some customers that utilize text message because they don't have a CRM, right? And the order, it's notepads and cell phones, right? And so they can simply
And
text in
WhatsApp
the name of the
messages.
customer. Yeah, exactly. WhatsApp works as well, right? You can simply text in the name of the customer you're visiting, and it can respond back with, "Oh, these are the things we want you to talk about." And for someone on the road visiting, half a dozen customers a day, that's extremely valuable, right? It's like I don't have time to go and run the report and analyze the data and understand what's going on with the sales. Just tell me, right? Back to my original example of the charts I used to send out, right? It's like just tell me what I should focus on with this customer and align it with the promotion we're trying to run or the inventory we're trying to move anyway. So that at the top of my list and in my text message could be that item of inventory that's sitting stale that there's a good likelihood this customer could take. And so that moves to the top of the I write that at the top of my legal pad, right? The things I want to talk about is to me it's a big deal, right? Not to introduce something new that everyone needs to log into, right? But sort of build it into the existing workflow.
Well, and I also think that, and I don't know if this is already in the platform, but I'm sure it's coming if it isn't already in the platform. I think the other thing is incentivization, right? Sales reps are coin operated, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you have stock that's in danger of going dead in 3 months and you really want to promote that and you are putting that into the algo of the system to help promote these items at the top of the list where it makes sense for that customer, then you can also pump in messaging around, oh, and by the way, if you happen to be able to get the sale on this within the next 30 days, then you're going to get an extra 10% commission on these items, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it really, really helps to, you get what you incent, right? That's the reality. And
Yep.
so by
Yep.
tweaking the incentivization structure on a case, I remember it like the whole spiff days in the days of selling cars. I used to many moons ago when I was a kid, graduated from high school and went into selling cars. And there'd be like, if a car had been on the lot for a while, or if it was a particularly high profit vehicle or whatever it might be, the sales manager might come out and go, right,
Yeah.
any one of you mother effers sells that car today, you get an extra $500 cash in your pocket
Yeah.
by me today. Right? I feel like
Yep.
it's that same kind of thing, right? It's very contextual in the moment where the business is at. And I think that this is the type of thing that doesn't just make sales directors happy, it makes CFOs happy too.
Yep. No, I agree. Yeah. To me, the incentive, it can come from obviously most of the distributors I talk to have sort of, commission, sales reps where there's a big part of that. But there is, in fact, the ability sort of as you have these things called triggers behind the scenes that are sort of like generating these cues. You can sort of add context to it and say, you can write in, hey, here's the 10% kicker you're going to get for these sort of things so that becomes part of the messaging to the team is here are the things we want to sell. And oh, by the way, here's, what's in it for you, for this particular customer.
I love that. And how, like, when we think about how hard or easy, as the case may be, to
Yeah.
develop this, I don't think you come from a development background. So I'm
Correct.
guessing that AI played a role in helping this engine come to life. How did you develop it? Do you have a development team? Are you a solopreneur? Like, how have you been able to build this system to be scalable across
Yep.
because the reality is that most distributors that I work with, that especially because I work with distributors that are like $50 million and above in revenue, annual revenue,
Mm-hmm.
and so they tend to have catalogs that are very large. Like in retail, if you have 150,000 SKU catalog, you're huge. If you're in distribution, you have 150,000 SKU catalog, you're not that big. Like,
Yeah. Right.
there's distributors with 5 million SKU catalogs. So
Yeah.
the
Right.
reality is distribution is a whole different beast when it comes to catalog size, scale, complexity, number of categories covered. Like, it can get complex pretty fast. So that means your platform, by definition, has to be scalable for these types of businesses. So when you thought about, sure, I have this idea of what I want to build, but I don't necessarily know how to build it, how did you go from idea to working in production product?
Yeah. Great question. So I would say for me, I'm not formally trained as a developer. Over the years, both working in distribution and in software, I'd say I learned enough to be dangerous. And I'd say particularly the skill set I developed was having a deep understanding of the data that, distributors would provide and being able to understand and to anticipate what that looks like across different industries, and then be able to do creative things with that. That was sort of, I'd say, the skill set I developed over 15 years or so. And so when I looked at how to solve this challenge, I began to look at AI as my co-founder. That's sort of my joke, right? It's the
Yep.
idea of like I'm able, if I were trying to tackle this 10 years ago, I would need a technical co-founder, right? Who could go and implement the idea, on
Yep.
my behalf.
You need a
But
CTO,
I'm
basically.
Yeah, exactly right. But I sort of, in the current tech environment, I'm able to sort of work with AI to execute the vision. Now, I'll tell you candidly, I've chosen to build it on basically like an enterprise level platform, not just a like oh,
A fully
I'm using
vibe
Cloud.
coded, everything from scratch
Correct.
platform.
Yeah, it's not like everything. It's more like, hey, I'm trying to tackle this problem, co-founder, right? How can we go about this, right? And it can sort of write, blocks of code. It can help me with the design of things, but ultimately I'm the one, doing the development also, in the platform.
You're the one briefing the
And
AI.
yeah, exactly. So to me, that's best of both worlds, right? For some people, it's like everything has to be through Cloud Code, and that's fine. But for me, it's allowed me to build out as a solopreneur what I feel is an enterprise level, platform, and I have enterprise level customers using it with, hundreds of thousands of products and things like that. Where that scale doesn't scare me at all. That's sort of what I expect, and the platform is built to, scale across that. But I have the capability to sort of be very agile, sort of in what I do. I'm actively talking with my customers, and they'll come up with ideas, and I'll deliver them the next week, right? Because I'm like, oh, I know how to do that, right? Or if I don't, I can quickly figure out how to do it and implement it in the platform. So to me, it's been a great, I think of it sort of the right time in history for someone like me to, tackle a challenge like this and have the tooling available to deliver it in a scalable way. So that's generally been my approach so far, and it seems to be working.
Love it, love it. Well, who knows? You maybe, Sam Altman is fond of saying that due to AI, we're going to have our first single person $1 billion
Yeah,
business pretty shortly here. I think there's a few $1 billion sort of two-person businesses now due to
yeah,
AI, but you who knows? You may be the first $1 billion business that's built on the back
yeah.
of AI with a single founder. Listen, is there anything that you don't do yet that you would like to add to the platform in the next 6 to 12 months, or is there anything you don't do that your customers are asking you for already that you don't do, that you say, look, this is high on our priority list, we're going to deliver this in, I don't know, the next 6 months?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. I'm at the point where I'm, working very closely with my existing customers and, listening closely to what it is they would like to do. I'll tell you about a couple of things I've acted on, sort of based on that feedback, and I'd say beyond that, I've got sort of a roadmap and things I work on, but ultimately a lot of the big ones I try to act on quickly to provide value back to them. So one is the ability to define companion products, and so the idea is like the particular challenge is, hey, when we're introducing a new product, we're actually not that good at selling it. So even if we had like an associated product algorithm, it would not pick up on the fact that this product goes with that product. And so I've helped them build a system that allows them to basically declare rules that are a bit more, it's declarative, like, well, if it's this size and it's this category, then let's recommend this size of this other thing. And so that's been very, that doesn't fit in food distribution, for example, but it works very well in certain industries. And so I've sort of given them a tool that allows them to, I think of it as attack the challenge of, hey, we're trying to get in this new product. We know roughly how they go together, but it's an insurmountable effort for us to try to build those pairings, product by product. So giving
or
them
maybe
an interface.
maybe to build a bundle or a kit or something like that, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. So I've sort of given them the ability to sort of give more high level direction around how those things want to work, and they're seeing a lot of value from that. Some
Sorry,
other
sorry to
feedback
interrupt.
I've
Sorry, just before you move
yeah, go
on,
ahead.
I think that's a really important thing that you've hit on there, and the reason why I say that is because in retail, bundling and kitting and sort of creating groups of products that naturally fit together. I think of fashion where you have an entire outfit that you're selling, right? So
Yeah.
you have an entire suit that you're selling. You got the jacket, you got the slacks, you got the you've got the vest, you've got maybe a tie that goes with it, you got a shirt that goes with it. Or if you're selling, I don't know, say you're a computer supplier and you've got, hey, cool, you can buy this RAM, you can buy this CPU, you can buy this keyboard, you can buy this mouse, this monitor, et cetera, and you can sort of buy this bundle together because it naturally works well together. But that is not, oddly, that is
Yeah.
still not that common in the distribution world. Now, they might have all the bits to put together a really compelling offering, and some distributors do. Like they might put I don't know, let's say they're a solar equipment distributor, they might put together a bit of a package with
Yeah.
maybe a battery and some panels and maybe some roof mounting equipment and maybe some wiring or something like that, but and maybe a controller. But this is still not that common in distribution, and I've
Hmm.
always wondered why that is, because there's always natural things that pair together nicely that, hey,
Yeah.
you could say, even if you don't discount it, but just the fact that you have put together a suite of products that are going to be plug and play with each other, sometimes just taking that weight off of the industrial buyer's plate, and so that they don't have to do that research, that homework themselves. You've done the homework. That's the value add that you provide as a distributor. This is significant, and it's a significant opportunity I think most distributors miss.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you see that. I see it similarly. I think, the complexity of how people are buying products and the uniqueness of each application, I think is what makes it really challenging to have oh yeah, well, of course you bought this, therefore you need this. What I'm finding working with my customers is by providing a means for them to declare sort of high level what those relationships look like, and then come up with specific item recommendations. So one, those recommendations get surfaced like at the time of reorder. It's like, oh, you're ordering the wire, well, therefore this is a good time for me to ask you about the connector or the cable tie that we believe fits with that product. What I've found is, like, I've had customers call it like good conversation starters, right? So it may not be that we've nailed it with the exact size, whatever, widget you need to go with what you're buying, but the fact that we're having a timely conversation and an informed one that doesn't make the sales rep sound stupid, right? Because they're close, they're in the ballpark of what you actually need. That leads to a really productive conversation around the additional products you can sell, even if you're not, hitting it on the nail with exactly what they're going to buy. You've started the right conversation.
No question. So sorry, back to your kind of your roadmap. I interrupted you, but I thought that was really important to bring that up because I think that distribution misses out on kitting and bundling opportunities too often, just because it's something
Yep.
that it's something that distributors, it's just not typically on their radar versus retail, where it's the most common way to increase basket size.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, a couple other things I'll mention about the sort of roadmap and things I've added on. One is around pricing guidance. So this is a huge topic, and I
Yep.
spent more than 10 years in the space, so I know sort of all too well how complex and challenging it can be. But what I've identified and what I've sort of heard from my customers is there's low hanging fruit, right? So a lot of distributors I'm working with work in what I think of as a negotiated environment where
Mm-hmm.
they're negotiating the price, right? There's not a list price, there's not a contract price. Sometimes there are, but for the bulk of what they're doing, they're sort of like spot sales, like, oh, you need some of this, here's the price, right? The buyer knows that they last paid, but they don't know what the margin is, right? They just sort of have sort of a general idea. And so what I've identified is, based on all the data I'm getting to do everything else I've described in the CueCode, it's like, well, we can also create recommendations that identify, oh yeah, they're due to reorder this product, and by the way, the target margin is 21%, right? Based on what we've seen similar customers buying for similar products, while giving you the opportunity to sort of turn a dial and sort of define what it is you want to do. And so, anyway, that's one area where I've sort of heard from the customers I'm working with, like, hey, can we also get some guidance in here? And I was able to apply my experience to deliver sort of a simple but very effective way to provide that guidance. Is how I think of it.
Yeah, almost like a CPQ, but like a light CPQ.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think of it as CPQ to me as a whole thing.
It's a whole industry of its own.
Pricing guidance tends to sort of go with CPQ. I just think of it as, hey, we're providing recommendations on what customers could be selling. Wouldn't it be also great if we could, as we're suggesting to you that this restaurant doesn't buy tortillas, how great would it be if we can also tell you a good margin to charge while you're pitching them tortillas, right? That's sort of, to me, that's kind of the end of the road, right? You can, that's very effective for the sales rep themselves. They're not used to, they haven't been selling to the customer, so they don't have a good benchmark. So let's provide them with a good benchmark that gives them confidence and helps optimize your margin as a company. That's, to me, the low hanging fruit that I'm addressing with CueCode. The third piece is what I think of as like in context analytics. So what I mean by that is, imagine, one of my customers uses Salesforce.com as their CRM. I don't recommend that, to distributors necessarily if they haven't already picked one, but for customers who are down that road, that's a committed and a very powerful platform that they can use. And so, I have the APIs and things like the ability to embed the cues in that. So when they're looking up a customer, they can see, oh, here are the 3 things I should focus on selling. I include in that what I could just call context of like text, right? It just says, hey, typically ordered every 3 weeks. It's been 4 weeks, right? Or, 50% of similar customers buy this product and they don't, right? But I've also then added the ability to surface a simple visual that is not like, oh, here's a dashboard you need to drill through, but something that just shows the visual learner, right? Here's actually the trend of how they've bought it every 3 weeks, and here's the predicted time we expect them to buy it. And so now I can visually see like, oh, this is like a very obvious thing I should ask this customer about, because of that. And so you can imagine there's, some technology to, align to make that happen, but I found an effective way to surface that in, again, in context. My goal is not to provide, I don't think of my, CueCode as a BI tool or an analytics tool even, but I do see the importance of surfacing a visual, an analytic at that time of decision or interpretation. And so I've found the means to do that, even via text message. I'll basically like create a link they can click on, and it shows them like a temporary URL with a chart that is explaining the thing they were just told to do via text message.
Yeah, I think of this just really as contextual data visualization. There's not much more than that, but it's super useful. And like for me, I'm all about show don't tell, right? And so if I can see something, and I've even written my own using AI. I've written my own finance management sort of control center for my business and personal life, and I bring in data from all the bank accounts and from all different sources, right? And
nice.
and I also I track all the transactions over time and what's where and what's been allocated where, and tax and all that sort of stuff. And then I created a whole dashboard with data visualizations on top of that. And frankly, 9 times out of 10, I just look at the data visualizations because I can take in what the data is saying so much faster with a simple pie chart or a simple graph or whatever it might be with some simple trends. Like I can absorb that so much faster visually than looking through a list of transactions or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my goal is sort of make that available so that when people want a picture, it's there for them to help them be informed about the guidance they're getting.
I love that. And how do you? And I like the CueCode name. I guess that's kind of almost like a play on words of cue cards, but it's CueCode. So that's what it feels like.
Well, it makes me feel good that you got that interpretation. Yes.
I love it. And how do you guys charge? You're a SaaS platform. Obviously, there's some integrations with ERP and CRM and maybe commerce, et cetera, that need to happen as well as implementing your platform. But how do you charge? Is it like a tiered, gold, silver, bronze? Is it on a per transaction basis, on a per recommendation basis? How do you charge customers for your platform?
So I'm generally doing flat fee based on the size of the business. So what I mean is like, if you're a $1 billion distributor, you're going to pay more than if you're a $100 million versus a $10 million distributor. But, within that, for that business, we'll sort of understand what's the scope of the business we want to cover. And then I'll basically provide an annual subscription that covers that business. Sometimes we'll break it down kind of user based, but my goal is to not be tied to user based because I want my customers
Everyone
to be
in
using
the business
it
to be using this.
I want everyone to be using it, and I want it to be in the in the e-commerce platform where it's like, well, I don't know how to count, a user, right? It's not necessarily a sales user, right? So I want it to be integrated into the workflows of order entry and your CRM and your e-commerce platform. I've talked to people about outbound email marketing, right? And sort of ultra personalizing the messaging that goes out, and so that doesn't lend itself well to user-based pricing. So generally we'll sort of come up with an annual subscription fee that covers the size of the business I'm working with.
Love it. Love it. And I know it's hard to envisage where AI takes us, but do you think that, I mean, I guess through your lens, your business may not exist without AI, right?
So I would say, no. I would say I would not be able to build this business without AI. AI. This is a topic I like. So I think there's a big misconception a bit about how AI works with data.
Yes.
And very candidly, and I'll tell my customers this, like, does CueCode use AI? A little bit, right? And when I say AI, I mean a large language model, which is sort of how we all think
of
about
it.
AI now, right?
Yep.
A little bit. The main value is derived from, advanced analytics and sort of modeling, right? And sort of stuff that ultimately, we could do and compute, years ago, but sort of having a good approach to do that is sort of things I've developed with AI and a way to sort of deliver it in a nice fashion. So I don't think of, I don't think of myself as an AI company. I mean, like, every software now is AI, and some people are looking for that, and I'm happy to sort of talk clearly about the valuable use case there. But to me, the big misconception is people think they can throw any data at AI and it will come up with useful answers. And
yes,
in some ways that's true, but there's a big difference between what I think a lot of people understand as structured data and unstructured data. So, right, so structured data is like the transaction data, your list of customers, the list of transactions, the list of products, right? The unstructured data is the handwritten, quote that just got, faxed to you or whatever, right? There's a lot of solutions for distributors that I'm seeing on the market around, like, the translation of that unstructured, it's a PDF I got, or it's an email or whatever, and I need to translate it into something structured. And AI is excellent for that, right? You have sort of a defined end goal, and you have a fuzzy input, and it's very good at doing that translation. Now, if you take all your transaction data and you feed it into, whatever, Claude or ChatGPT, and say, help me find the customers who stopped ordering products, you will get an answer.
Yes.
And then if you ask it the same thing the next week, you will get a different answer.
Correct.
Right? Right? It will,
because it's probabilistic, right? It's not deterministic, and that's the difference.
Exactly. And what I find is, for systems like this, having a deterministic output is very important. And so what I find value in is sort of using AI to come up with the best deterministic output that solves the challenge of being able to build this, to systematize this sort of, account growth, guidance. And so I don't think of, certainly I've demoed my product to people, and they've said, I could build that with AI overnight. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm not going to tell you can't, right? Because it took, I spent a couple of years on it. You could build stuff, but it's not just like a AI throw it in and get some output, right? I'm very intentional about the approach that allows you to scale it at an enterprise level, get results that are explainable, right? It's not a black box, right?
Well,
it's not
and consistent, and consistent
and
as
consistent.
well.
Exactly, right. And so, in that sense, I don't think, who knows, right, where these, models are going, but they are language models. They work on language, not on data, right? They're not replacing SQL. They're writing SQL.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is very helpful, but ultimately it will write it differently, every time you ask. And so anyway, that's something I think is a big misconception around sort of how AI has wonderful use cases in distribution, and it's part of CueCode, but it is not, I would say, central, to what I'm offering. And I think, I don't think it's going to, put me out of business, tomorrow or whatever. So that's my bet.
Love it. I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. And that's been my experience with AI. And I think it's great for coding. I think it's great for, so many things. But, where, a human has to come up with the problem statement. That's the thing. Human BAs, human solution architects, people able to create the architecture and the design of the output that they want to see, so that they define what good looks like. They define what a good output ultimately looks like, and working with the AI to build something that leads to that great output. I think that is very valuable. But I think AI can help you code, but it's not great at telling you what you should be coding for.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
and and,
Yeah.
and that still requires human creativity. That still requires domain expertise. And that's where I think, people think that AI has domain expertise, and it doesn't. And that's the key. It does. I've spent 26 years in this industry, right? It doesn't have my 26 years of experience in the
Right.
LLM.
Right.
I've never put it into any LLM. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't have your 20 plus years or however long it is that you've been in your industry. Like, it doesn't have that in the LLM. And so, and it can't invent that. It can't invent 26 years of experience. It can't create that as training data, right? So yeah, totally agree with you there. Slight tangent. What is something that you do outside of work, or that you're interested in outside of work, that might surprise people?
Good question. Well, I told you I have a large family. I have 4 kids. One of my favorite hobbies that's unusual is I maintain an outdoor ice rink in my backyard in the winter. So
Wow, that's cool. That is seriously cool. So do you have to do you put up like a
two by
frame
tens.
around where
Yeah.
the water
Yeah.
goes?
Yeah. 2 by 10s and a large tarp, which basically comes from. So the Canadians have a lock on the outdoor ice rink market, but ultimately it's like farm supply that it ships from. Yeah, I'm interested in distributors, so I order it from their e-commerce site. And it ships from like drop ships from some farm supply company. It's basically a giant tarp, flood it with water when the weather's good, and it creates a great outdoor activity for a couple months, out of the year. You can learn to skate and have fun. And yeah, anyway.
That's seriously cool. I didn't think that was a thing. I had no idea that was a thing. I
Yeah,
thought
but
you always went to an ice rink. I didn't realize you could,
no,
that
yeah,
makes sense. Like, you build a
you
frame
got
and you put a tarp in it, fill it with water, and
you got to get at least north of the Rio Grande to do that. But yeah, it's possible. So.
that's seriously cool. I like that. I like that. Very, very cool. I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and your website in the show notes. Other than that, what's the best way to get a hold of you and talk all things sales enablement for B2B?
Yeah, you can book a demo on the website. You'll end up talking to me. You can send me an email, brian.hirt@cuecode.io. Yeah, look forward to chatting with anyone who's interested.
I love that. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, now is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you and let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Mr. Brian Hirt from CueCode, what is your question for me today?
Great question. Well, great opportunity. I would say honestly, so I've talked with a number of folks in the B2B e-commerce space, and I talk about the opportunity for personalization using the data provided. I see it as a significant untapped opportunity in basically that e-com tech stack. But candidly, I have not gotten many people to share my same vision, or they're very focused on the PIM data, which is all very important, right? But I see most distributors have very imperfect data, and I feel like what I'm doing with CueCode has uncovered an effective way to act on that data across all these different channels. And I find that a lot of people in the space are sort of very hunkered down on our data's got to be perfect, and that's sort of the mantra, and they can't sort of get past that to sort of understand that there's opportunity to be made on the data you have in the applications you have, and in just getting more personalized. And I'm sort of curious, I think you've lived more in the e-commerce space than I have, and you've heard my thoughts. I'm curious where you think the disconnect is, or why this e-commerce application doesn't resonate with everyone the way it does with me. That's my question.
Because most sales reps are old. That is the fundamental challenge that you are going to face for the next 5 years. So I wrote a Substack a few weeks ago about the silver tsunami that's coming to
Mm-hmm.
B2B sales. And something like 80% of sales reps are either going to age out, retire, die, whatever, in the next 5 years in
Yeah.
North America. So we have people that are clinging to their knowledge, their experience, their ability, their ownership of their accounts, their proprietary data, all the stuff that makes them super valuable as a sales rep, that's getting paid $1, $2, $3, $400,000 a year as a specialized vertical specialist sales rep. They're hanging on for dear life till they retire, and they're just trying to ride out the AI wave until they retire, because they don't really want to have to learn anything new. They don't really want to give up any information to the machines. They don't really want to make everything that they know one to many. They don't want that institutional and tribal knowledge to leak out into digital systems. That's what they don't want, because
Mm-hmm.
it devalues, or as they see it, it devalues their value to the companies that they work for. And
Yep.
so I think that, that is just going to change by default, as we know already that the buying demographic has changed. Okay.
Yeah.
Research data from the US shows that over 70% of B2B buyers in the United States today are millennials and Gen Z. So the buying demographic has already shifted. They expect
Yeah.
to be able to do things digitally. They expect to be able to lodge digital quote requests, digital RMA requests, check inventory, check pricing, log in, research the catalog, be able to have that turn up in their LLM of choice. Like, they just expect all that out of the box. They expect to be able to be serviced via EDI and punch out and increasingly agentic purchasing systems. And the reality is that's the selling side of the industry is going to be dragged kicking and screaming into the future. And that's what's happening. And so your technology, most sales reps, maybe not all, but certainly a good portion of them, would see that as a threat to the unique value that their experience brings to the table. And they say, well, look, if this is democratized and this is available to all the reps on our team, and now what made me a great sales rep in the past was being able to do what your technology allows a brand new rep in the company to do. Now, all of a sudden, you've taken away a significant chunk of my value to the business, and it's going to put downward pressure on my wages and my commission.
So so I agree with what you said, and definitely most of the conversations I have don't start with a rep, because that is often the reaction. When I'm talking with their managers and they're thinking about,
Yes.
how can I get the new rep I just hired to replace the one who retired? How can I get them up to speed? CueCode's very attractive. And I find that, generally those conversations go well. Like, when I'm talking with sort of leaders in distribution, they understand what I'm talking about, right? These are challenges they've wrestled with for a long time, and the solution seems clear. What I really was trying to ask is almost more your audience, right?
Yes.
I'm guessing, right? These are people, these are B2B e-com practitioners.
Yes.
And these are the folks that I think don't always make that connection between, like, provide basically like increasing the personalization. In the same way that we can provide guidance for a rep, we should be focused on providing guidance in ecom. And what I find is that practitioner audience sees it as an afterthought, right? It's like, it's more about, just trying to sort of get people into the platform and get them ordering, and they just assume they're going to keep ordering forever. And, and we don't need to be proactively selling to them, like, and sort of my carousel of, abandoned cart is enough. That's sort of the, anyway, that's sort of what I was trying to ask as well.
Yeah, I think in those scenarios, proofs of concept, light proofs of concept, are the way in the door. Like, to say, look, we're going to come in, we're going to set this up for you, we'll get it integrated into your website, whether it's JavaScript, whatever it is that, a snippet of JavaScript. We're going to make this as easy and as low lift for you as possible. It's not going to cost you a dime. We're going to give you a 30-day trial on this. Let's check out the uplift. Let's see what the contribution margin that we add is. Let's see what the AOV lift is. Well, let's see what the CLV lift is. Let's look at these key metrics to see and to prove to you that what we know to be true based on our existing experience, making it as low risk, low effort, low cost, no cost ideally, to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. That is what is going to win digital directors over from, manufacturers and distributors that are running, digital operations. That is the kind of thing where it's like, hey, look, let us prove to you that what we know works offline can work online. And let us prove that to you, and let us prove that we understand the unique needs of online B2B customers versus from personalization perspective here versus retail personalization, because they are so different. They're kind of called the same thing, but they are so different in the way that they work.
Totally
they're not even cousins. They're like a totally different species, right? And so and it's the same even with subscriptions, right? There's no such thing as subscription in the B2B world, right? It is auto replenishment. Like, that is as far as you're going to get in the B2B world, and most of the time that's going to take the form of a soft bump via email. It is not going to be a fixed subscription like the retail world. So there are analogs in each world, but they are not a one-to-one replacement of that technology. And so I guess helping them understand, look, this was built from the ground up for you, right? This was not we took something that was from the retail world and bolted on some B2B stuff. No, that's not what we did. We built this from the ground up for exactly your customers' use case. And I think if you can prove that through free trials and POCs and all that sort of stuff, I think that's how you get their attention. And obviously coming on podcasts like this and broadening the discussion about it and everything.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. I've had multiple cases where I've had allowed a distributor to do a free pilot where they were sort of getting recommendations via text message, because that's obviously very low integration for the team. And we did exactly that. We're able to sort of show the value and actually show proven result. Hey, they got the recommendation, they got the order. That the measurement is built into CueCode. But yeah, the offer stands, right? If anyone's listening to this and they're doing e-com and they're wondering, hey, how can this work in my business? Happy to help someone do a free proof of concept there as well.
I love it. Brian, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Really appreciate your time. Love what you're building over at CueCode. Wish you every ongoing success with the platform and going out and landing those next new amazing enterprise distribution customers. And I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.